Greetings all, I'm Dubious Khan, and welcome into the Idiot Box, a showcase of the best, worst, and weirdest that television has to offer. Recently, the entertainment industry lost one of its most visionary filmmakers, an unparalleled master of horror and suspense who is responsible for creating not only one, but two major horror movie franchises. I am, of course, speaking of the legendary Wes Craven. Director of such classics as The Last House on the Left, A Nightmare on Elm Street, and the Scream series, Wes Craven left an indelible mark on the world of filmmaking and was the gateway for millions of horror fans the world over. But what most people don't realize is that Craven also dabbled in television from time to time. Early in his career, he directed several made-for-TV movies, and additionally, he also directed several episodes of the 1985 revival of The Twilight Zone. But today we're going to take a look at what could have been his greatest contribution to TV. An anthology show with a twist. Today we take a look at Nightmare Cafe. Premiering on NBC in January of 1992, Nightmare Cafe has a unique premise. There is an otherworldly, possibly sentient cafe that can change its location and has one unique purpose. It grants some of its patrons a second chance at some aspect of their life. Those who enter the cafe can find themselves gaining that second chance, but to do so, they'll have to play by the cafe's rules, and you never know exactly what lurks behind any of the doors. What makes Nightmare Cafe unique in terms of being an anthology show is the fact that it actually has a recurring cast of characters. Now, when Wes Craven originally pitched the show to NBC, he described it as The Twilight Zone meets Cheers, which meant that he was going to have characters that bookended the opening and closing of each episode, much like Rod Serling in The Twilight Zone or the Crypt Keeper in Tales from the Crypt. But as he wrote the pilot once the series was greenlit, he realized that the characters he was writing about were the ones he wanted to be the main focus of the series. Nightmare Cafe has three main characters: Frank Nolan, played by Jack Coleman, Faye Peranovic, played by Lindsay Frost, and the cafe's manager, for want of a better word, Blackie, played by Freddy Krueger himself, Robert Englund. The series pilot introduces us to Frank and Faye in an unusual manner. Faye jumps into a bay looking to kill herself, and Frank just happens to be swimming in it for reasons which will be explained later. Frank saves Faye, and the two of them take refuge in a nearby cafe, and as they do so, we're introduced to Blackie, who, in addition to being part of the story, also has the ability to break the fourth wall.
You believe in second chances? It's human nature, isn't it? But for a second chance, would you face your worst nightmare? The very thing that frightened you most, or drove you to the brink of disaster? Or would you then see those good folks? Well, they're about to get a second chance. And you know what? I bet they blow it.
Oh, right, I forgot to mention. You'll have to excuse the quality of the footage in this review. Much like the You Don't Know Jack game show, Nightmare Cafe really has not had an official home video release. In fact, I got mine from some crazy Haitian bootleggers who apparently got all their source footage from an old VHS tape somebody recorded all the episodes on back in 1992. Sorry. Anyway, Frank and Faye find the cafe empty, and Frank reveals he has no idea what he was doing swimming in the bay in the first place. Exploring the cafe, they find a change of clothes in the form of cook and waitress uniforms. Faye is a little suspicious of Frank's motives, and things get even weirder when Frank makes a joke.
Goosebumps.
Hey, careful, mister. I wrote the book on guys like you.
Friendly men and how to avoid them.
I'm spoken for.
Lucky you. Lucky him.
Aren't you cold?
I've been colder. Once in Alaska, I lived on an iceberg for a year. Of course, I was married at the time.
Time to a penguin. Heard that somewhere before, sorry.
I just made that up.
But this joke is just the beginning of the weirdness. As Faye changes clothes in the ladies' room, Frank turns on the TV mounted in the wall, only to find that it's showing what Faye's doing. All you guys out there who are watching this, pay attention. Because this is what you do in this situation. You turn the goddamn television off. And then you do this.
You see anything in there?
Like what?
Like a hidden camera? I turned on the TV and there you were.
There I was. What?
There you were changing into your waitress uniform.
What color underwear do I have?
I get it. You're Lois Lane, I'm Superman?
What color?
White?
Everybody wears white underwear. That's no test.
With a little red heart on the back?
You pervert! You peeked through the keyhole.
The door doesn't have a keyhole.
But let's backtrack a little bit because we kind of skipped over Faye's own moment of weirdness in the bathroom. After Faye gets dressed, she hears someone crying and finds a sliding door in the mirror, which reveals herself, apparently from earlier in the evening. Which leads us right back to where we were.
Let's see. Turn it on and let's see. Uh-huh.
Swear to God.
Job?
Of course.
Where?
I worked at a chemical plant.
Worked?
Work. I'm a night watchman.
Well, that's nothing to be ashamed of.
Uh-oh.
What?
Uh-oh. I'm a night watchman at that chemical plant.
As they watch, they discover the TV is showing Frank earlier in the evening at his job where he discovers some thugs are taking waste from the chemical plant and planning to dump it in the bay.
Must be from the weapons plant.
So what is your worst nightmare?
So we gonna dump this stuff in the harbor? Yeah, the usual spot off the
Seeing
old
something that needs to be done and not doing it.
What didn't you do?
I chickened out. I knew they were dumping waste in the harbor, and I just looked the other way.
Well, I have to admit, it's better than my worst nightmare. There's piranhas, industrial machinery, and 6 Celine Dion impersonators for some reason in mine. As they continue to watch, Frank realizes that he doesn't remember the factory worker in white being there earlier in the evening. Then things get really weird when Faye suddenly finds herself alone in the cafe.
Come on, Superman.
Yeah. I wish.
Whoa, whoa, whoa! What the hell do you think you're doing?
Where are you going with that?
Who's asking?
Frank Nolan. Who are you?
I'm Boyle, head of operations. That's who I am. Now, you want your job or you want to join the homeless? Well,
Shove your job.
Yes, Frank. Frank?
Remember how this series is about second chances? Frank heads off to call someone, but the goons fight with him, and a new guy in a trench coat and hat knocks him out. Faye tries to call 911, but can't get through for one very good reason.
We're sorry. The area code from which you are calling is not serviced by the telephone company. Please hang up and dial again.
Yes, come to the Nightmare Cafe, where we always have plenty of space for parking. I'll show myself out. The boss orders the goons to kill Frank, but not until they make him watch the sludge get dumped into the harbor. Frank, however, comes to in the trunk and then tries to steal the truck, and then... again! Wow, that must have been some seriously combustible crap if one single bullet could do that. Anyway, as for Frank...
Miss me? You know what? I don't think this is your run-of-the-mill all-night cafe.
Except now that Frank's back, yep, it's Faye's turn. Well, almost. When Frank opens the door in the mirror, who should be there but the goons? Frank tries to escape out the back and ends up back in the bay, while Faye sends the goons to the ladies' room. And here's where we get our next major hint that any door in the cafe can open pretty much anywhere.
It's hiding in the ladies' room.
The 5th annual All Precinct Police Turkey Shoot is officially open! Take your places! Ready! Aim! Go!
This place has possibilities. Hey, you boys remember to put the seat down?
And now, it's Faye's turn.
This is you getting ready. So what's the problem? Why don't you want to see this?
I just don't. I don't want to be in this place.
Faye?
We open for business yet?
No. Yeah. We will be. Come back later.
Nah, I think I'll, stick around for a while. This ought to be interesting.
Faye makes a call to her boyfriend Al, who is, in fact, cheating on her. Even worse is, he's the guy who ordered the goons to kill Frank, cementing another connection between the two of them. Frank tries to warn Faye of the danger she's in, but of course she can't hear him. But then, Frank figures out one of the rules of the cafe.
Faye, I wish I could be there for you.
Damn.
Faye stops to pick up the now hitchhiking Frank, but as she does so, the goons drive by, recognize them, and start shooting. There's a chase, and Faye manages to force the goons to drive into the bay. In case you haven't guessed by now, time is kind of getting twisted on itself. And it actually clarifies something that happened earlier.
Worked my way back across Asia. Too odd. I ended up living in Alaska on an iceberg.
Really?
Yeah. Of course, I was married at the time to a penguin.
I don't get it.
That's okay, you will.
However, Frank's attempts to warn Faye off from seeing Al only creep her out and she kicks him out of the car before heading to Al's apartment. Once there, Al tries to keep her from finding out he has another woman in the bedroom, but Faye happens to spot a report from the chemical plant and a string of women's clothes all over the floor, followed closely by the woman herself.
Sweetheart.
That could hang him out to dry. It's a record of everything he's dumped this year.
Take it. Take it. Yeah, right!
Dream on, Frank.
And once again, things get... odd. As Faye leaves, one of the goons shows up and again recognizes her. When he tries to explain what's going on to Al, Al discovers the dumping report is missing and immediately realizes Faye took it.
She's in with the watchman. She had him in her car and she drove us off the pier.
I thought you got rid of him.
Yeah, so did I.
Boss sees those papers, I'm dead. I find them on her, she's dead.
And if you find it, you're dead. And if the dog finds it, he's dead. You know, let's make it easy. Let's just kill everybody in town to be on the safe side. We cycle back to the scene Faye saw earlier in the ladies' room as she looks for pills to kill herself. Not finding any, she drives to the harbor where we saw her at the beginning of the episode, except this time, things don't go the way they originally did.
What am I doing here? I don't have to do this. Kill myself? Just because some guy dumps me, I'm punishing the wrong person. I'm as good as anybody.
Better than most.
I must have been crazy. What was I thinking of?
Beats me.
You stuck by me. And you're not such a bad guy. As a matter of fact, you're pretty terrific.
Thanks, so are you.
I'm young. I'm healthy. I've got my whole life ahead of me.
Yeah, all 30 seconds of it. Al shows up and tries to run both of them down, forcing them to jump back into the bay and drown again. Of course, they end up back at the cafe, where Blackie finally explains what's going on.
We are alive?
Courtesy of the cafe. It gave you a second chance. You did the right thing. Good for you. Good for the cafe. Especially since it had a couple of job openings. You know, you made a difference in your lives. Hey, now you get to make a difference in other people's lives. Here, everybody gets a second chance.
Everybody?
They're out there, buckaroos. Good or bad, dead or alive, we get 'em all. In they wander, never suspecting this place is anything out of the ordinary, never knowing what secrets lie beyond the doors. And you have been selected to help them and maybe learn something about yourselves along the way.
Selected by who?
Let's just say a higher authority and leave it at that.
And now, as many of these shows often do, it's time for the villain to get his comeuppance.
And is that man in the courtroom today? Could you point him out to us?
There he is.
Yes! Kill him! Fire! Waste that guy! Hey, wait!
Cup of coffee, Al?
What would you like for your last meal?
Not again! Hey, take a pill if you can't sleep!
And so, Frank and Faye make the most of their second chance and take up employment serving up hot coffee and second chances at the Nightmare Cafe. Now, despite the title and the Wes Craven pedigree, you've no doubt noticed that Nightmare Cafe really isn't exactly a horror series. That's because in 1992, most of the network shied away from actual horrific elements in their primetime lineup. What Nightmare Cafe actually is more of a supernatural fantasy series with horror and anthological elements. No, I'm not entirely certain anthological is actually a word. Of course, because Frank, Faye, and Blackie are all heavily involved with the stories being told, it's only natural that some of their own backstories would become involved. Episode 3 gets into Faye's home life in Faye and Ivy, where Faye's younger sister comes to the city and gets mixed up with a total scumbag who expects to be able to live off Ivy's successful sister. The second episode, Dying Well is the Best Revenge, sees Frank nearly head into disaster at the hands of a femme fatale who chooses him to be her latest patsy. However, for my money, there are 2 episodes which showcase Nightmare Cafe at its absolute best. Episode 4, The Heart of the Mystery, focuses on a detective who, after getting shot, finds himself in the cafe, which has split him into 2 places and slowed time down long enough for him to solve a deeply personal case that has gone unsolved for over 15 years. And there's no reprieve here. The bullet gets closer and closer to the detective outside the cafe over the course of the episode, wounding his counterpart inside when the bullet reaches his arm and ultimately killing him at the end. But, this being the cafe, that doesn't mean a happy ending is entirely out of the question. This episode is an engaging mystery and you genuinely feel for the detective and his plight throughout it. Frank's own backstory comes to the forefront in episode 5, Sanctuary for a Child. The cafe shifts location to Frank's hometown where a young boy comes into the cafe, but Frank and Faye quickly realize that this is the soul of a boy who has been in a coma for some time after a cave-in at a local mine. Things are further complicated when Frank realizes that the boy is the son of his best friend and the first love of his life. Again, no reprieve for the kid here. He's dying and there's nothing anybody can do to stop it. And in actuality, the story isn't so much about the kid getting a second chance as it is about his father getting a second chance after running out on him and his mother all those years ago. And Frank also manages to lay a few old ghosts to rest in the process. 2 really great episodes. Unfortunately, there's one episode which is just plain awful. Also common with anthology series, Nightmare Cafe does have a sense of humor, and it's clear that occasionally the series was intended to have a few just plain silly episodes. That's certainly the case with the final episode, Aliens Ate My Lunch, where an unscrupulous tabloid reporter creates a UFO hoax in a small town with Frank and Faye caught between him and a crooked sheriff and the UFO hysteria that follows, as well as dealing with actual aliens when all is said and done. This episode, while occasionally amusing, is just plain bad and way too over the top for this concept. Actually, the concept may be why the show got canceled after only 6 episodes. It might have been ahead of its time. Back in the early 90s, these kinds of shows were popular, but they were mostly in syndication and didn't really have a narrator character interacting with the story, or they just didn't have bookend characters at all. Nightmare Cafe had some truly good ideas on how to change up this format, and it would have been really interesting to see where it eventually went. Unfortunately, NBC stuck it in the ratings dumpster that is Friday night prime time, and hardly anybody watched it. After the 6th episode, the show was canceled due to low ratings. It has had a couple of reruns on both the Sci-Fi Channel and Chiller, but otherwise, that was pretty much the end of Nightmare Cafe. Now, personally, I really like this series. I like the concept, I like the supernatural elements, I like the recurring characters and the actors who play them. I even like most of the stories, with the exception of Aliens Ate My Lunch. But what's really cool about this series is that it managed to capture that odd, otherworldly feeling that all-night cafes have. If you've ever been into one at like 3 in the morning, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Nightmare Cafe capitalized on that otherworldly eeriness of the all-night cafe and used it to tell stories of redemption and punishment. Honestly, I'd like to see them try to make this series again today. With the looser restrictions on the networks and the better effects that are available, or hell, even if they just went directly to something like Netflix or Hulu with it, Nightmare Cafe could possibly be one of the best horror fantasy TV series of our time. Now, if you want to find this series for yourself, well, you're going to have to do some digging. Like I said, it's never had a formal home video release as of production of this video. It is entirely possible that whoever owns the rights is going to try to capitalize on Wes Craven's passing and might eventually put it out on DVD. Who knows? But until then, you're really going to have to look, or like me, contact some crazy Haitian bootleggers to find a copy of it. But if you make that effort, I think you'll find it worth your time. I'm Dubious Khan. Join me next time for another trip into the Idiot Box.